Good afternoon from Heirloom Books at 6239 North Clark Street in Chicago, Illinois. I'm Jeff Helgeson, talking today about someone who's often been characterized as both an enigmatic eccentric and one of America's most significant poets who, while alive, anonymously published only 10 out of a total of 1,775 poems and one letter. The rest of her work eventually appearing in various versions and separate editions over a period of 65 years following their writer's death. In 1874, when Ralph Waldo Emerson released an anthology of American poets, this writer was not included, although neither were Edgar Allan Poe, Herman Melville, or Walt Whitman. By omission, it would seem that Emily Dickinson had been placed in fairly good, although greatly different, company from herself. Sharing none of the alcoholism of Poe, the world travel of Melville, or the overt, robust sensuality of Whitman, Miss Dickinson generally offered up relatively short poems without titles that frequently address such topics as death and immortality, minutely detailed observations of nature, spirituality, aesthetics, and deeply personal feelings of loss. With such memorable opening lines as, "The doomed regard sunrise with different delight. Hope is a thing with feathers. I heard a fly buzz when I died, and because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me." Dickinson routinely invites thoughtful introspection and evokes a unique kind of logic that is entirely her own, even when she exhorts the exploration of time and geographic space through the individual act of reading, stating in around 1873, "There is no frigate like a book to take us lands away, nor any coursers like a page of prancing poetry. This traverse may the poorest take without a press of toll. How fugal is the chariot that bears the human soul." Another poem Dickinson wrote some 14 years earlier seems to reflect both her literary tastes and an interesting affinity with the author of Jane Eyre, whose death it commemorates, ending, "Oh, what an afternoon for heaven when Bronte entered there." The extent of a parallel with Charlotte Bronte only became fully apparent in 1938 when a Dickinson biography written by George Frisbee Whittier was published titled, "This Was a Poet." But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. As evocative as Emily Dickinson's poetry certainly is, revealing the prismatic consciousness of a truly distinct mind, it has also been some of the eventual eccentricities of the woman who, during her precociously sociable teens, had predicted that she would become the Belle of Amherst, but ultimately evolved into an apparently agoraphobic recluse who, dressed in white on all occasions, rejected conventional religion while remaining personally devout, and wrote her poetic letter to the world that never wrote to her in secret within a rose-patterned wallpapered room looking out across a graveyard, sewing her poems into small packets before hiding them away only to be discovered by her younger sister, Lavinia, following their author's death in 1886. All of this, of course, largely helped to create the overall mystique that has become associated with Emily Dickinson's name. In terms of the facts that are generally available, Emily Elizabeth Dickinson was born in Amherst, Massachusetts on December 10th, 1830. She was the second of a lawyer, state legislator, and one-time U.S. congressman's 3 children, having an older brother named William Austin Dickinson, who most frequently called Austin, and a younger sister, Lavinia, whose discovery of the dresser drawer filled with poems would ultimately serve to preserve them for posterity. As described by Louis Ottenmeyer in Lives of the Poets, Emily was a rebellious young person who attended Amherst Academy and then Mount Holyoke Female Seminary, having stated on one occasion, according to Ottenmeyer, that she had no particular objection to becoming a Christian. She's also alleged to have proclaimed, "I am one of the bad ones," when pressed to declare her faith by revivalist zealots of the Second Great Awakening during the 1840s. When asked for a photograph on one occasion by a potential suitor, Dickinson has been reported to have responded, "I have no picture, but am small, like the wren. My hair is bold, like the chestnut burr, and my eyes, like the sherry in the glass that the guest leaves." Following her single year at Mount Holyoke, Miss Dickinson returned home when she was 18 years of age, and then, in her 20s, once more, according to Ottenmeyer, she transformed into the legend that haunts the literary world as a mysterious ghost, which is perverse yet Puritan. This transition took the poet from writing in 1850 at the age of 20. "Awake, ye muses 9, sing me a strain divine, unwind the solemn twine, and tie my valentine," to penning such lines within the final 2 works in her collection as "Too happy time dissolves itself," and "The cricket is her utmost elegy to me." Along the way, between poem number 1 and those respectfully numbered 1774 and 1775, there lay a cloistered world of insight and speculation that is reflected by enigmatic observations which challenge a reader's mind to enter into a wholly individual form of consciousness, even when refracting the primary equation of John Keats' 1819 Ode on a Grecian Urn with "I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb when one who died for truth was laid in an adjoining room. He questioned softly why I failed. For beauty, I replied, and I for truth. Themself are one, we brethren are," he said. And so, as kinsmen, met a night, we talked between the rooms until the moss had reached our lips and covered up our names. I mean, what should someone think about assertions like, I'm nobody, who are you? Nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell, they'll advertise, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring bog. Now I suppose an answer to this overwhelming question is up to each reader to determine. The same can probably be said for, I like the look of agony because I know it's true. During the 1850s, it seems that Emily's most significant relationship was with her eventual sister-in-law, Susan Gilbert, who Austen married in 1856. In one of the daily letters Emily wrote to her, she stated, Susie, will you indeed come home next Saturday and be my own again? And kiss me? I hope for you so much and feel so eager for you. Feel that I cannot wait. Feel that now I must have you. That the expectation once more to see your face again makes me feel hot and feverish, and my heart beats so fast, my darling, so near I seem to you, that I disdain this pen and wait for a warmer language. Poem number 249 is also thought to be dedicated to Susan, as demonstrated in a 2018 motion picture titled Wild Nights with Emily. Wild nights where I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart, rowing in Eden, the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee. But aside from some fairly obvious conjectures, I suppose the real thing many people may want to understand is, as Oprah Winfrey might express it, what happened to you, Emily? What provoked a poem like my life closed twice before its close. It yet remains to see if immortality unveil a third event to me. So huge, so hopeless to conceive as these that twice befell, parting is all we know of heaven and all we need of hell. Efforts to develop an understanding about that have been undertaken at least since this particular poem was first published in 1945, 59 years after its author's death. And there have been a number of different speculations. Among them, the most credible, to me at any rate, appears to relate to a pair of separations from significant others for the poet, aside from her sister-in-law, one by death and the other by distance, as well as providing the parallel to Charlotte Bronte that I mentioned earlier. The first of these two losses seems to have been of an apprentice attorney to Dickinson's father named Benjamin Franklin Newton, who was 9 years older than Miss Emily, and who introduced her to reading the works of William Shakespeare, as well as having given her a copy of Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem prior to marrying a woman 12 years older than himself and then dying of tuberculosis shortly after that in 1853, just following his 32nd birthday. And not long before Emily Dickinson's mother became ill enough to be bedridden, needing care from her two daughters for the next 25 years until her death in 1882. Another significant loss is Charlotte Bronte's infatuation for a married man is thought to have been related to a Presbyterian minister named Charles Wadsworth, possibly somehow related to the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's mother, who Dickinson met in Philadelphia in 1855 after a visit with her father to Washington, D.C., and the person some researchers have concluded may have been referred to as Master by the poet in two of her surviving letters. During the early part of the Civil War in 1862, Wadsworth left Pennsylvania to head up a congregation in San Francisco, not seeing Miss Dickinson again for 20 years. He was seemingly referred to in one poem as the fugitive whom to know was life, and who died himself in 1880, 2 years after having paid a final visit to his admirer, and 6 years before she died herself on May 15, 1886. The truth of all this, of course, will probably never be known, as Charlotte Bronte observed in one of her poems, "The human heart has hidden treasures, in secret kept, in silence sealed. The thoughts, the hopes, the dreams, the pleasures, whose charms were broken if revealed." Or, as Emily Dickinson herself wrote, "A secret told ceases to be a secret. A secret kept, that can appall but one," while also having stated, "Truth is so rare, it is delightful to tell it," as well as, "Tell the truth, but tell it slant." Aside from poems by Dickinson that were published anonymously and without consent by Samuel Bowles, family friend and the editor-in-chief of the Springfield Republican newspaper, it was only after her death that the full extent of her literary efforts was discovered. Even though she had begun a lengthy correspondence with Thomas Wentworth Higginson when, in 1862, he had published advice in the Atlantic Monthly regarding how young writers could go about getting into print the same year that Wadsworth had gone off to California. Dickinson asking, "Are you too deeply occupied to say if my verse is alive?" It was only after Lavinia had, as instructed by her sister, burned Emily's letters, that she discovered several hundred poems and, according to an article on Wikipedia, became obsessed with seeing them published. First, turning for help to Susie, their brother Austin's estranged wife. Livia then turned to his 34-year-old married mistress, Mabel Loomis Todd, who subsequently recruited Higginson's assistant, and together they produced a heavily edited volume of verse normalizing punctuation and, perhaps for reasons of social discretion, as well as possible feminine rivalry, eliminating references to Susie, which was published in 1890. Following its success, a year later, a second collection appeared, and then a third sequence of poems was published in 1896. Next, Between 1914 and 1945, the daughter of Susie and Austin, Martha Dickinson Bianchi, released a number of additional publications from manuscripts possessed by her mother, while Mabel Todd's daughter, Melissa Todd Bingham, also produced a number of versions of poems which her mother had control. Somewhere between a possible cover-up of the intimate nature of the relationship between the poet and her sister-in-law and a desire to provide access to a truly distinctive poetic voice, almost a dozen editions of Emily Dickinson's verse came into existence before a definitive collection of her poetry was made available, as edited by Thomas H. Johnson in 1955 after Harvard University had obtained Dickinson's literary estate. Among the insights offered up within Emily Dickinson's vast collection of verse are such observations as, "The truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind." And then, to her assertion, "If I read a book and it makes my whole body so cold no fire can warm me, I know that is poetry. If I feel physically as if the top of my head were taken off, I know that is poetry. These are the only way I know it." Is there any other way? Making one's own determination about her work, therefore, it seems, in Emily Dickinson's words, must dwell in possibility. Heirloom Books is located at 6239 North Clark Street in Chicago, Illinois.